Hey everyone! Today we're going to be doing some old school AI driver testing on what Tesla is calling their occupancy network by throwing some objects of varying shape and size in front of the car to see what it's currently recognizing and what it ignores. I'm doing this because there's supposed to be some pretty big improvements coming up in this area soon, and I wanted to get a benchmark. But before we get started, I need to give a huge shout out to my wonderful wife Carol you see there for making this video possible. Please show her some love in the comments, but not too much love, you weirdos. This video is sponsored by Insta360, and the majority of what you're going to see today was recorded with their 1x2 360 camera for those awesome third-person views, and the 1RS 4K Boost Edition, which was used for the first-person view. There's a sale happening for the next week, and if you purchase a camera using my affiliate code, you get the selfie stick I use for the third-person view completely free with your order. So, if you're interested in purchasing a camera, please consider using my code, which is linked in the description, which also directly supports the channel. In short, Tesla's occupancy networks that were shown off during AI Day 2 are able to detect and control for objects that it doesn't fully recognize on the road. You can see here it's building a cuboid map around the car that shows all the occupied space in the scene, even rendering things like the stabilization arms coming off this truck, which is pretty dang awesome. It's also capable of predicting movement of these cuboids and controlling for them. Here you can see it detecting a swerving trailer and then reacting to it by moving over in its lane and slowing down. I know that FSD BETA version 10.69 was the first version that started using these networks at some capacity, but I'm really not sure how much they're currently used. Based off what I saw during the presentation, I know there's going to be some big improvements coming, so let's go ahead and see where we're at right now. We're going to start off with something simple. A piece of cardboard stood up on its side in the middle of the road. Things will get progressively more difficult as we go through the video.
Okay, let's go.
I'd also like to mention that we're doing these tests at the end of a dead-end road with a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, so no need to worry that we're interrupting traffic by placing things on the road. If we go ahead and pause the video for a second, you can see even though it's not displaying the piece of cardboard in the visualizations, it still does plan a path around it. At least initially. Let's see how it does. That was, not quite what I expected. Autopilot seemed to change its mind at the last second and decided to ignore the cardboard completely. You can see some little swerves while it's deciding what to do here, but does end up running it over at nearly full speed. Let's go ahead and give it another chance. You can see this time it does start showing an object in the visualizations, but only briefly. This time it does follow through with its original intended path and makes its way around the piece of cardboard. Very smooth and nicely done. And since we had two very different results, let's go ahead and give it one more try for good measure. And looks like I got the same result on the third attempt, so let's go ahead and move on to something a little bit more difficult. This time we're using an empty Starlink box. This should be a little bit more challenging because it's a little lower on the ground and it's also about the same color as the road, so probably a little bit harder to see. As the car begins to accelerate, keep your eye on the planned path. You can see as we're pretty far away, it plans a path around the box, but same thing as the first attempt with the cardboard. As we get closer, it then changes its mind. Definitely not the result I was hoping to see. In this case, it was probably fine because the box was empty, but what if it hadn't been? Something like this could probably cause some pretty serious damage. Let's go ahead and give it one more shot at that one. The crazy thing is, it's planning a path around the object from so far away, and if it would just follow that path, it would be fine. But unfortunately, something seems to be overriding that behavior. The next thing we're going to try is to flip the cardboard box on its side to see if the height makes any difference. Based on what the visualizations are showing, looks like Autopilot's having trouble figuring out what this object actually is. You can see it's a trash can and then it turns into a cone. Also had trouble deciding which way it wanted to get around it. There was a few frames where it wanted to go to the right, but get around it did, and I much prefer this result over the previous one. The same thing happens on the second attempt where you can see it's detecting it as a trash can and then a cone, but this time it gets around it much more smoothly. And this got me thinking, maybe since it's an early release of these features, objects it decides to control for might have more to do with the height rather than the overall width, and perhaps I wasn't meeting some minimum threshold that's required. So, to test this theory, we attempted to set up my microphone arm box, which went well. After a small discussion, we bravely decided to give up and place the box on its side lengthwise instead. And I'm sure you can guess how that turned out. Good. It deserved that. Alright, time to start turning up the heat. We now have a wheel sitting in the middle of the road. Seems to be doing a better job of visualizing the object the entire time, and seems like it has a pretty solid path, but then kinda, again, changes its mind at the last second and gets a little squirrely. If we watch that back at a quarter speed, you can actually see for a couple frames it visualizes it as an entire car sitting there. This is a wheel off of a Model S, so it's probably seen a million images of that wheel. I just think that's really, really funny for some reason. The second attempt goes very similarly, where it originally plans a great path, but then as soon as it gets close, it changes its mind, gets indecisive, and hits the brakes hard. Might have been a little better than the first one, but still pretty rough. Let's go ahead and kick it up another notch by turning the wheel on its side. This time it does a really nice job of following its original planned path and gets around the wheel nicely. Although, maybe a little bit too close for comfort here. It seemed to treat this the same way it treated a piece of cardboard, and I wish it gave it a little bit more room. Now let's see how it does when the wheel is rolled out in front of it and in motion. I thought this was pretty nicely done. It stayed on the display the entire time, and it even displayed a message saying it was changing lanes away from a path blockage there for a second. But let's be honest, that was a bit of an underhand throw, so let's give it a fastball. This time I asked my wife to throw the wheel out a bit later. Not a good result there. You can see as we slow this down, it doesn't display anything in the visualizations until it crosses over into our lane. But at that point, it'd probably already be too late. And here's that exact same scenario one more time for good measure. And same result where it wasn't rendering the object until it crossed over. And since it was written in the release notes, we're also going to be doing some UFO testing, or at least as close to a UFO as we can get. My wife will be holding up my window shade to hide herself and make a large reflective surface. Now, before we continue, I know a lot of you are concerned for my wife here, but I want to assure you that there's nothing to worry about. Before filming this video, I got her a really nice life insurance policy, so everything's fine. First attempt going pretty well. You can see it plan a path around and actually follows through with that path. You can see as we got closer, it actually did start visualizing her as a human. Now let's have her walk across the road into our path. For science, of course. I am actually extremely impressed that it's able to visualize her as a human, even with being so obstructed. Now we're going to dial in that intersection point and give the beta a little bit less time to react. And don't worry, the deal was that she wouldn't actually cross the center of the road. It did slow down there a bit, but kind of a late reaction. Now she's going to try walking a little bit faster into the road. This time autopilot brakes hard, but still does go by. And for the final boss test, she's basically just going to be running out into the road. This one was actually handled really nicely. It reacted early and came down to almost a complete stop. Overall, I'm honestly a little disappointed that it didn't avoid some objects that I thought it would be perfectly capable of controlling for, but I'm also blown away at how well it's able to detect humans. I can think of a certain holiday coming up where humans dress up as non-human things, so this is really nice and reassuring. Thanks for watching, and thanks again to Insta360 for sponsoring this video. Until next time, everyone. Bye.
Looks like it's working.
Okay, I'm coming.